Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 22nd, 2025. Well, there's growing momentum toward bringing down Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet, and to put an end to his policy of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. Now, he's been able to stay in power despite facing an arrest warrant for his murderous policies from the International Criminal Court, despite the daily evidence of growing killing coming from the Israel Defense Forces imposition of rule over Gaza, the control and the shutting off of food and medicine and so on, and despite his turning his back on the demands of the Israeli public that he act to bring the war to an end and return the hostages. So his popularity within Israel remains high for one reason only. As long as there's a war, the people are still traumatized from October 7th to the extent that they're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt to fight the war. But the polls are showing that as soon as the war is over, he'll be gone. So it's in his interest, his personal political interest, to keep the war going. Now, in spite of that, the opposition internationally continues to grow. Besides the Israeli public's traumatic response, which is changing, it's beginning to turn against him. But despite the polls that show they want it to continue until Hamas is defeated, the key to keeping him in power is support from the United States and from Europe. Now, this is something which is changing and is changing dramatically. And the attempt by Netanyahu to annex more property, more land in the occupied territory is hastening the opposition to him internationally. What the Israeli government is doing by annexing parts of the West Bank is to carry out something they call facts on the ground. That is, to put more and more of the land that should be part of a Palestinian state in the hands of Israeli settlers and Israeli civic authorities, to make the establishment of a Palestinian state less and less possible. Now, the other weakness of Netanyahu right now is the fact that the ultra-Orthodox are prepared to pull out of his coalition government because of their opposition to being drafted to fight in the Israel Defense Forces. But let me point out something that I think is one of the most significant factors, which is the continuing shift in international opinion away from support for Israel. And there was a statement issued yesterday of extreme importance from Cardinal Augusto Lo Giudice, a member of the Vatican Supreme Court, which makes it clear, as he was most likely speaking for Pope Leo, that the Vatican is now prepared to move into the support of the coalition that's trying to put an end to this war. What Cardinal Lo Giudice said is that it's justified to call the policy of Israel genocide. He said, killing of children is, quote, beyond madness. We can no longer hold back from denouncing it. This is from a representative of the Pope. Now, he said, no peace can come from revenge. And he said that the driving of the people out, the Palestinians, the so-called enemy out, is not a basis for peace. And he said there's a need for a, quote, mobilization to stop the tragedy of a horrible war, which he called one of increasingly senseless and totally devoid of any human and moral justification. And then he touched the third rail when it comes to Israel by saying that the policy of Netanyahu and the fundamentalist extremists who are supporting him, of Greater Israel, of driving out the Palestinians, he said they are committing the same atrocities toward the Palestinians that were committed against them, a reference to the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews in Germany. In other words, taking the gloves off and saying a genocide is a genocide. This is now increasingly being said around the world. But for the Vatican to lend its moral force to this is quite significant, especially since the Vatican has come under criticism, some of it just and some of it unjust, for not denouncing the Nazis in the 1940s. So by saying that the rabid Zionist extremists who are committing genocide as part of an ethnic cleansing to rid Palestine of Palestinians is the same as the Lebensraum policy justifying Nazi killing of Jews in World War II. Now, put this together with the isolation of Israel internationally and the moves to create an alternative. In particular, I'm referring to the conference on July 28th and 29th at a UN forum in New York City titled On the Two-State Solution of Palestine-Israel. This is sponsored officially by France and Saudi Arabia, but it offers an opportunity not just for countries to come out and take pro forma stances against the killing, but to begin to put in place an alternative. And what we're doing, what the Schiller Institute is doing, is calling on all our supporters, all the international networks that have been attending our conferences and participating in the International Peace Coalition meetings, to go with the intent to bring the Oasis Plan of Lyndon LaRouche to the center of the drive for peace. Now, the reason that's so important is that you have to do something about the despair and the anger and the sense that people have that there's no basis for an agreement. Why should people that have been fighting for 75 years, including with increasing barbarity from October 7th to the present, why should those forces stop fighting, and what's the basis for peace? And what LaRouche emphasized in the Oasis Plan is that peace requires not a political agreement, because political agreements can be based on lies and can be broken, but on a policy that puts in place incentives for mutual benefit. That's what the Oasis Plan represents. Mutual development by making sure that there's adequate water supply for agriculture and for life in Israel, in Palestine, and spreading over into the broader Arab world of their neighbors. This is how you cut through the despair. This is the idea of a Westphalian solution, that you achieve peace by making your country's policy one which is based on acting for the benefit of the other, to remove the hatred, to move beyond revenge to reconciliation. And that's why Naledi Pandor, the former South African foreign minister, referred to this as a Mandela-style solution. Now, the fighting has to stop. And what that means is no more arms, no more weapons, no more support for Israel as long as they continue this policy of occupation and killing. But going to the land for peace formula that was underlying the Oasis Plan in 1992-93, that's the way that you can then move to the implementing the Oslo Plan, but that's how you could implement the Oasis Plan. The two-state solution, which many people say you can't do, well, that's international law, and it could be done if you had a basis for making it function economically. And that's what the LaRouche policy was designed to do. So we have put out a statement which will be linked at the bottom of the description page for all of you to read and circulate and work with us to build support internationally for a fundamental break in international policy from a geopolitical confrontational winner-takes-all strategy to a win-win approach of mutual benefit. In other words, incentivizing the end to hatred by offering a potential for a better future. That's what the Westphalian solution is. That's what the LaRouche organization is fighting for. And if you think it's impossible, then you haven't realized that in history, fundamental breakthroughs come from people rising up to do that which seemed impossible. So that's my report for today. Take the leaflet and get to